Hi, and welcome to Vlad'll Do It, where I try different products and projects. Behind me I have a 2012 Honda CRV. This car is obviously a black car, and the reason I mention that is because today I'm going to be doing a paint restoration to it. Now, this is a low mileage vehicle and it's been very well maintained mechanically. However, the paint hasn't been very well maintained. As a matter of fact, I think there have been some very poor washing practices, and as a result, the paint has been scarified with a tremendous amount of scratches, swirl marks, all sorts of defects and imperfections that are easily viewable. So when this car is in the light, whether you shine a light on it or in natural sunlight, if you're standing far away, it looks fine, but the closer you get, you'll be able to see them as they're quite apparent. So this car was in desperate need of a paint restoration, and I decided I was going to give that a try. So I'm going to be using certain products in order to do this restoration project, and those products that I've chosen to use are from Meguiar's, and it's no coincidence that I chose to use Meguiar's product. The reality is I chose them because they happened to be on sale, and that's what gave me the idea of trying this project, to do it on a minimum budget if possible. I've done detailing work in the past, and I've used some pretty good equipment, my own equipment, which were a torque polisher, which is a dual action and variable speed polisher, which works extremely well, with a variety of different cutting pads and finishing pads in order to do the project from start to finish. Today, unfortunately, I don't have the luxury of having that polisher with me. I have a polisher that I'm going to be using, which is less than optimal, but I suspect it's going to be better than doing it by hand. So it's just a one-speed 10-inch pad polisher that I have in conjunction with certain pads that you see behind me. A couple that I had laying around, and two bonnets that I went out and purchased, two microfiber bonnets. I also have a couple of hand applicators that I purchased. Those are just going to be some spongy microfiber type applicators that I'm going to do and use in the smaller and tight areas. Besides that, I'm going to be using a polisher to do the whole car. Now, before the polishing, I'm going to be doing an extreme wash, and for that I'm going to be using my pressurized automotive washer by Simonize, and that's going to take off all of the winter residue. It is springtime now, so I'm going to be giving it a good spray to the underside as well, the undercarriage, the wheel wells, trying to remove as much of the soot and whatever else grime may have collected on the car over that period of time. After that, I'm going to be doing a clay barring, and the clay bar kit that I'm using today is going to be the Autoglym Clay Bar kit. Now, this clay bar kit is by a UK company located in Letchworth, England, and the product itself is fabricated in Japan. But I did have high hopes for this kit, and it's where I spent up. It wasn't on sale, but clay barring is actually a very essential step to doing a paint restoration. So you want to make sure that you don't skimp in certain areas, and a good clay bar is certainly worth its weight in gold. So that's one area where I decided not to skimp out. And the clay bar kit cost me $35. The review that we're doing today is most interestingly going to be about the Meguiar's product. So I started with after the clay barring, I started with the Ultimate Compound by Meguiar's, and after doing the Ultimate Compound, which I applied using the 10-inch buffer that I had, I used the Ultimate Polish. And of course, once that was done, I sealed it all in with a new finish. And yeah, that's more or less it. So we're going to get to the first steps, which is going to be the washing, and let's begin with that right now. This is clearly not the best way to start, but it's what I have, so it's what I'm going to use. It's a wash and wax. I don't normally like those wash and wax combos, and of course the first thing that you would probably want to do in this situation is strip the old wax from the car before you get to doing any of these steps. But quite frankly, in my opinion, the waxing capacities of these wash and wax mixes are less than stellar. They're pretty lousy, so I don't really worry too much about the waxy finish that it's going to leave on the surface of the car. And oh yes, and I purchased myself a drying towel from Simonize. I prefer using leather chamois, but this was cheaper, so I bought that. And of course I'm going to be doing the washing with this pressure washer to try and get off as much of the grime as I can. So all right, let's get started then. It's all up Okay, so I spent a good long while cleaning the car. I washed it, I guess you could say maybe even twice, because I went over it a few times. Like I said, this is the first real spring cleaning after a winter, and you want to be able to get away as much of the dirt and grime in the washing stage as possible. So looks good from here, obviously, but to tell you the truth, the closer you get, the more discouraged I am, because the paint is actually in pretty rough shape. Now I hope this shows up on camera, but there are plenty of swirl marks and light scratches, and it looks to me like something that I would attempt to do with a more aggressive polish. As you can see here, there seems to be like an area that you could see swirling in a very small area, and there's definitely a lot of scratching. Now that's probably a sign of the brushes that are used to clean snow, or somebody else who will remain nameless possibly going over it with a dry rag, trying to clean it without using soap and water, which is extremely inadvisable. So I wouldn't do that at all, ever. So I don't know if you could see the scratches here, but there's definitely plenty there, plenty to look at. I mean, look at that. That's just really, really bad. You see, I removed the license plate. You can see what the paint underneath is. Here, there's obviously no scratching, and I don't know if you can see the difference there, but I hope it shows up. I know black paint sometimes it's tough to see on camera, and you know, you stand a couple feet away, it looks just fine. It looks actually quite nice, but you know, we're gonna try our best to revive it with what we have, but I don't know. Even I'm skeptical at this point. So I wanted to show you the paint again after the car had been cleaned. Now, just with the lights that you're seeing from up there on the ceiling, you might be able to see some swirl marks, but let me turn on another light here and see if we can't accentuate what it is that I'm talking about. And if you take a look, the surface is really quite bad. I mean, there's a lot of scratching here. It breaks your heart to see it, to tell you the truth, but in any case, this is what I'm going to try and use that polish to remove, at least give it a chance and see if it works. Couldn't get any worse, at least. Well, I guess it could, but theoretically the idea is obviously to make it better, not to make it worse. But you could see here that the paint is really been scarified quite a bit, a lot of surface scratches. And you know, when you're talking about black paint, it really shows. It really does. Let me see if I can show you another area here. Let's go to the back of the CRV. You can see it's pretty much all over the paint and everywhere. So it's not sort of secluded to one area of the vehicle. It's literally all over. So this is clearly something that's going to have to be addressed. I mean, it's every panel, every spot that you can find on the car has some form of scratching to it. So that's the situation as I'm dealing with it to begin with. So I'm going to get to the touch-up paints now, let that dry, and come back and do the clay barring. I've read a lot of people who have a sort of this preconception that they have to use the entire clay bar on the car. A clay bar even of this size, which isn't very large, but a clay bar like this, to tell you the truth, could probably do at least 5 cars. So you don't need the whole clay bar. Just cut a portion of it off and knead it into a pancake-like thing and start rubbing it against the surface in a back and forth type fashion, never in circles or anything like that. And just concentrate on doing a section at a time, and take your time and try and do it diligently. So I'm going to cut a piece of that clay bar off and get started. So I'm going to try and do this section by section like I recommended before, that you should try and take it slowly and sort of separate it into small areas that you could kind of handle doing little by little. I've got a piece of the clay bar here, and I've sort of flattened it out and kneaded it into this pancake-like shape. And I'm going to spray liberally this section here, and I'm going to go back and forth, up and down, that kind of thing, to try and remove the surface grime and whatever particles might be embedded into the paint. And I can tell you that the paint, it doesn't actually feel that bad right now. It's not too rough, but I suspect it'll feel much glossier and slicker once this clay bar has done a couple passes over it. So just to give you an idea of how this is done, let's just take the lubricant here,
Make sure that the thing is turned to on. And you got your microfiber towel there, so we spray the lubricant on the surface, like so. Make sure you got good coverage because you don't want to have an abrasive approach to rubbing the paint. And then just like this, back and forth. Take your time. Make sure you get all the surface. And the clay should be doing the work, picking up the contaminants and all that sort of stuff that might have been embedded into the paint. This is a process that does take a little bit of time, but you know, put some good music on and it should go fairly quickly, hopefully. And what I like to do usually is I'll sort of mentally make a note of where I've created a line for myself. So for me, it's going to go from this corner point of my light down. That's up to where I've done the clay barring, and so I have an idea of where to start next time. So, and you'll feel it. You'll feel a little bit of the friction and the resistance as the clay bar picks things up off of the paint. So just like this, and you might be able to see certain little particles that get embedded in the clay. So what you could do is you could just fold it over, flatten it out again, and then restart. Already I could tell you I could feel it gliding much easier. So I can see that a lot of the particles that may have been embedded in the paint have been removed and picked up by this clay bar. And I think this clay bar is not too bad. Actually, it's a bit of a stiffer clay, which is good because that's going to get off some of the more aggressive contaminants. And I have high hopes and high expectations for that. So simple as that. Just keep going over it until you feel the clay bar more or less just gliding over the surface then. And then you'll know that you've removed all the contaminants. And for me that feels pretty good. I'm not feeling anything resist. And the bumpers tend to be areas that you might have to go over a few times, because obviously when you drive, that's the side that faces all the incoming. So, you know, whether it's bug carcasses or, you know, whatever it happens to be near the wheel well, sometimes you can get iron particles that are coming from the brakes and that kind of stuff. So, okay, once that's done, just take your microfiber, wipe it down. That's it. Move on to the next section. Oh boy, smooth as glass. That's beautiful. Big difference. Here there's resistance when your finger goes across it. You'll feel the resistance. Here, it's as if the car's been waxed. This is always my favorite part of detailing because it's really incredible how much the clay barring removes and restores the paint to a good and natural state. And it's an extremely important step, and I think something that people should try and do more often. So I'm gonna keep going and do the rest of the car. the $35 that I invested in this clay bar kit was well worth it, because I could tell you for a fact that this Autoglym clay bar worked really well, and I'm extremely impressed with it, and I'm very happy that I decided to spend up instead of getting one of the more generic brands that you might find in any automotive shop. So if you're wondering if you have an Autoglym product in hand and wondering whether or not it's any good or whether it'll suffice as a clay bar, I can tell you that from my experience it's been fantastic, and I certainly recommend it. So, you know, I'm just going to finish this little portion off here and let it sit overnight. That's going to be all I do for today. I'm sort of doing this slowly and in parts. And then I'm going to do the worst part tomorrow, which I absolutely detest. Before the polishing, it's not the polishing, I don't mind that so much, but it's the preparation, and that's taping up all the areas of the vehicle that you're going to want to protect from the abrasive compound that is the polish. So it's now time for the least interesting part of this paint restoration project, part that nobody likes, but is sort of important, kind of like sanding and woodworking. Nobody likes to sand, but it certainly helps with the finished product. So I'm going to tape up all the trim areas, try and protect the plastics and the chrome areas and those things that I do not want to be affected by the polish. So let's get to that. So I started taping at 8:30 in the morning, and it's almost noon now, so I'm going to break for lunch. But as you can see, the taping has been completed. I've protected all the areas that I think are in need of protection so that I can polish without too much concern about getting on the plastic trim or the chrome trim or anything like that. I've obviously left exposed the paint and only the paint. So the car has been completely taped up, and it took a really long time. Obviously, you can see I did everywhere on the roof and everything. It certainly took a very long time. However, as much as I dislike the process of doing the taping up of all trim, it's, I think, a necessary procedure because it just saves a ton of time at the end. After you've finished polishing and waxing, you obviously just strip the tape and not worry about having marred or put wax on plastic parts or anything like that, because if any of you have tried this before, you'll know that those products are actually very difficult to remove off of plastic once you've accidentally done that. So well worth it. Took a long time, but now that that's done, I'm going to leave it on obviously for the next 2 stages, and it's going to hopefully make everything go quicker from now on, and I don't have to worry so much about the trim pieces. I could just concentrate on the polishing to make sure that I hopefully do my best to get rid of those swirl marks, but I think that's less reliant on me and more reliant on how good that Meguiar's polish is. So big question, is the Meguiar's polish going to be able to remove the swirl marks and the horrible surface scratches that I have? And just to refresh your memory, this is what I'm dealing with, which looks terrible, but let's see how well that polish works.
All right, let me stop it right here for a second. The reason I'm asking this question is because originally I had intended only to use the polish on this paint, but after having washed the paint and inspecting it a little bit closer, I could tell that the polish just wasn't going to cut it. So the answer to that question is no, the polish is not going to do it. So that's why I decided to go out and purchase the compound. The Ultimate compound is obviously a more abrasive substance, and that's going to do better to try and remove the swirl marks and the scratches.
So I've had a moment of reconsideration. I was sort of examining the paint again, and the swirl marks and the scratches on the paint are, in my opinion, so bad that I don't know, even before even trying it, whether or not the polish is going to be an aggressive enough compound in order to be able to remove them. Obviously, I don't have the greatest buffer either, so it's going to be a challenge in both respects, whether with the polish itself and with the combination of the polish and buffer. So that being said, I put a lot of work into this at this point in time. This is my third day working on it. I've sort of sparsed it out. I haven't been working all day on it, but this is my third day working on the truck, and I spent all morning taping it up, as you can see, so I got all the necessary areas protected. So instead of wasting my work, I did a little further research and I decided to go with something a little bit more aggressive. So the polish is what I had originally, and I will be applying this after the step that I'm going to do next. And that is the compound. So I went out and I actually bought the Ultimate compound from Meguiar's, and I'm going to try this stuff. This is obviously far more aggressive. It has far more abrasive compounds in it, so it should be able to take care of the scratches and swirl marks. So let's get started on that. Okay, so I've put the pad on here now. You can see it's quite a large one. Normally I like working with the 6-inch ones. Those are the ones that I use normally with my torque polisher, but like I said, this thing is ancient, and if you're wondering why I'm wearing gloves, it's because the handles on this actually were rubberized, and like I said, this thing I bought, I don't know what, like 15 or 17 years ago, and the rubber has just begun to disintegrate, so I actually had to wrap it in hockey tape, and I ran out of hockey tape, so I had a little duct tape to just finish it off so it wouldn't come off on my hands. But it's still, some places started coming off on my hands because I couldn't wrap every single centimeter of it, so I'm just wearing this to prevent that. Okay, so to start, the best thing to do is to prime the pad. I bought a couple of these too, so these are going to be my pads that I'm going to use to apply it in the smaller areas, because you can see this one's very large. So, but in any case, let's get started on the hood, and first things first, I'm going to apply this to the pad here so we can prime it. You're probably, I know that looks like a lot, but I have to prime the pad, and I'm only going to do this once. Obviously, once the pad is primed, it's good to go. I'm just going to take this and spread it around. Because I don't want the pad to be dry and cause further damage to the paint. That's obviously sort of counterproductive to what we're attempting to do here. Okay, so the pad looks fairly well primed. Let's take it to the hood and see what we get out of it. Alright, so we have a clean microfiber towel here. I'm going to try and section this off into smaller areas because we want to make sure we give all the paint the attention it requires. So you don't try and do an area that's too large. I'm going to separate this into 4, and I'll do each quadrant separately, and we'll get started with that. Tap down the area that I'm going to be tackling, spread it around. Now lightly spread it as well, and then get into more aggressive passes. Okay, let's have a look, you see. Get another microfiber. Let's have a look. Well, there's a touch of improvement. I think it actually might have needed a little bit more, to tell you the truth. If you look on this side versus this side, I mean, it's clearly better. But I think I'm gonna try and go over it one more time. You can see the difference here to here. And I think if I had a better buffer, this might work better, to tell you the truth. But you know what? Let's try it again. So I've done the hood now, and I'm pretty pleased with the results, quite frankly. I mean, you could still see that there are scratches that are somewhat visible, but you know, compared to what it was before, this is a big improvement. And I guess if I was to make a comment on the compound, the Meguiar's compound, I'd say it's pretty good. It's fairly simple to use. I'm not worried about burning the paint or anything like that, so long as I keep the buffer moving. I'm not worried about having poor hazy results, because the paint is fairly new, being that it's a 2012. So the product itself I'm pretty pleased with. I think the failing here is the buffer that I'm using is really for the birds. I mean, I really wish I had my torque polisher here. That one there would, I think, do a much better job, because obviously it has variable speeds, and I could use the proper cutting pads and all that sort of thing. As it stands right now, what I'm using is, you know, it's a 1-speed. There's no choice in that matter. And the pad that I'm using, I mean, it's just a sponge, more or less. I mean, there's not much stiffness to it, so I don't think it operates very well as a cutting pad. So I'm trying to go slowly over the areas, repeat that process. I don't want to overdo it though. So, but you know, it's not great. I'm not going to say it's fantastic, but I do think that with the correct equipment, that compound could be used to a much greater effect. That being said, I am fairly pleased with where we are right now. I am going to be polishing it again after the compounding, so it might still do a decent job of removing the rest of these scratches, or at least a portion of them. So we'll have to see how that goes. But all in all, I'm pretty pleased. I mean, look, it looks nice and shiny. I mean, it definitely looks better than it did before. There's no question about that. I mean, we saw what the surface looked like before. The surface was pretty scarified and in bad shape. So this is certainly, I'd say 70% improvement. So there's still definitely 30% to go. That being said, though, the compound is quite good. I'm happy with it. So I'm just gonna keep going now. I could sort of say that my opinion about the Meguiar's Ultimate Compound is kind of inconclusive. And the reason I say that is because though I did like using it, I thought it was fairly user-friendly. What I can compare it against is I use the Chemical Guys stuff. I know that that comes with mixed opinions, but personally, I've had nothing but good results with the Chemical Guys. And I can compare the Ultimate Compound to the Chemical Guys VSS, which is what I used from their product line, and I think I got better results with the VSS. Now, there's a caveat to that. The caveat is that I have a fantastic polisher buffer. It's a torque polisher, and it's a dual action polisher, and obviously I had to go along with that, the correct cutting pads. By contrast, the Meguiars I used with this piece of junk. And quite frankly, it is a terrible, terrible polisher. Like it's useless. Honestly, if you have a chance to buy something that looks like this, my advice to you is don't. Just walk away. Generally, you get what you pay for, and insofar as compounding and polishing, I wouldn't use those at all. But I mean, it's what I had, so it's what I used. I didn't really feel like going out and spending another $200 on a polisher. The idea of this was to try and do this inexpensively. That being said, it did do an okay job. It certainly didn't remove all the scratches and marring, but it did give the paint a sort of rejuvenated shine, and it removed, like I was saying yesterday, maybe about 70% of it. So you can certainly still see scratching on the paint under light, but it's nowhere near as bad as it was before. Now, I still have the polishing step to do, and I'm going to do that now. But, you know, as far as making an opinion about the Meguiar's Ultimate Compound, it's kind of like putting E85 ethanol in like a 1982 Chrysler K car and expecting that suddenly I turned it into a BMW M3. Well, that just isn't the case, you know. You need to have the right tools for the job, and get yourself a good polishing buffer. Those things are invaluable, and they tend to vary in price. My experience is that the Torque one is fantastic. I really, really like it, and I got excellent results. And another thing that's very important is to have the correct cutting pad, because I use this piece of junk. It's really, and I mean, it tore as well, but it's less than optimal. So, you know, I worked with what I had, and I think it came out pretty well, all things considered. But it certainly could have come out better, and I don't know that I could blame the Ultimate Compound for the lack of the results that I was hoping to get. But I can certainly point to the buffer that I have and say that that was the weakest link, no question about it. So I would definitely like to try the Meguiar's again using my Torque polisher, and I would expect to get much better results out of it. That being said, if you're going to do it by hand, you're definitely going to be giving a lot of elbow grease to try and get it to compound correctly. But also that, of course, depends on the state of your paint when starting. As we saw before, this one was pretty bad. So, all right, I'm going to get to the polishing now. Well, I guess the buffer heard me talking shit about it because it just died. So I guess it figured since I didn't appreciate its work, it was going to go on strike, and to hell with it, so it retired. Which I guess proves my point. The thing is a piece of crap, so. In any case, I didn't even get anywhere, really. Just this one little section I started doing, so. I mean, I guess I'll try and continue it by hand and see if I can get my hands on another buffer. So with the help of a friend of mine who lives not too far away, I was able to procure another buffer. Kind of convenient that it's the same size buffer that the one that I was using is, because I had an extra few bonnets, so I wanted to use obviously the new bonnets that I had. So let's give this another try. The polishing has now been completed. It took me a while. And the Meguiar's Ultimate Polish, what have I got to say about it? Well, I'll say that the good thing is that it certainly did give it a nice glossy finish. I mean, it seemed to revive the black to like a mirror finish, which is really nice. There's no question about that. It's beautiful. Compared to where I started, I think we're in some pretty nice looking territory here. The paint looks really nice compared to where we began. Product is good, no question about that. It does do as it says it'll do and give a nice finish to the car, especially when combining it with the stage of compounding first. Did the compounding and polish remove all the scratches? No, it didn't. But I don't know if that's necessarily a factor of the compound or if that's more the polisher that I was using. I'm willing to bet that it's more the polisher I was using. I did not like the polisher at all. I fought with them the entire time, including the one that I just borrowed from a friend of mine. I absolutely hated it. However, I still think it's better than doing it by hand. So that being said, I used them because that's what I had. Now, the compound I liked, and I would like to try it again, and I would continue to use it. But I would try it with the correct polisher and correct cutting pads. However, the Ultimate Polish, on the other hand, while it did give a nice finish, no doubt about that, I don't think I'd ever use it again, quite frankly. It performs fairly well, however, it's an absolute nightmare to remove. You know, I find myself completely fatigued at the end of this. My back is sore, my shoulder is sore, my arm is sore, and that's because taking the polish off is an arduous process that I never want to have to repeat again. Now, I tried several different things in order to attempt to improve that. First, I thought perhaps I was doing it in too large of a section, and the compound, or pardon me, the polish was drying out too much, so I shouldn't let it dry out so much. And so I started doing smaller sections, but that didn't seem to do anything. Even in the small sections, I was really fighting to try and remove it. I thought perhaps my bonnet was too dirty, so I actually replaced it with a new one, and that did nothing. I was still fighting it. It was just a nightmare. The polish is really difficult to remove. As you can see, I'm still fighting with it here in certain areas, and clearly the longer it stays on there, the harder it is to get off. So I tried to change my timing and do my passes, do less passes, and get at the polish a lot sooner so that it would be easier to remove, and it really wasn't. It just was an absolute nightmare to remove, and for that reason alone I wouldn't use it again. However, it does look nice and glossy, there's no question. So if you want to get a damn good workout and perhaps a good night's sleep, but I expect I'll be sore tomorrow, then I guess you could use this Meguiar's polish. Maybe there's something that I was doing incorrectly in terms of the application, but quite frankly, I was following the instructions on the back of the bottle. I'm exhausted now after having done that, and it's because the product takes a long time to be able to remove. That being said, that's going to be it for today. I'm going to let the car sit in the garage overnight again, and tomorrow's final step, you see I'm still finding everywhere little spots, and I rubbed, you know, trying to get this stuff off, but I still find little spots here and there. Yeah, it's just very annoying. Tomorrow's gonna be the last step. I'm gonna seal all this in with new finish, which I've been using for years and I think is a fantastic product, and that should be the end of the paint correction. So, you know, as I said before, from where we started to where we are now, it's a massive improvement, no doubt about it. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect, but I didn't have the best equipment. However, the Meguiar's Compound, Ultimate Compound, I think is a good product. I would certainly use it again. Ultimate Polish, never again. Gives good results, far too hard to remove. The lesson takeaway from this too is also that having a good polisher and buffer, well, those things are really worth their weight in gold. You know, you get what you pay for. These types here that are the 10-inch pads without any variations in speed, they just, you know what those are good for? Those are good for applying a wax. That's it. I mean, you just put wax on the pad, run it up and down, get a good coat and cover, and wipe the wax off. That's about all those things are good for. But for compounding, no. For polishing, no, absolutely not. Get yourself a good one. You know, you're going to pay about $150 to $200 for it, but I'll tell you something. You can find them on sale if you keep your eyes open. I own the Torque X. That one there is phenomenal, in my opinion. I've used it and gotten great results out of it. Okay, that's it for today. Beginning day 5 of the paint correction restoration. Some of you might be saying 5 days. My God, that's a hell of a commitment. It definitely is. But keep in mind, you can do this with a little bit of elbow grease and determination in 1 day. I have done a paint correction in a single day by myself. It took me 13 hours start to finish. So I think I started at like 9 a.m. and I ended up finishing by 10:30, something like that. So it is doable. You will be banged up at the end of it, but that being said, I didn't want to do this all in 1 day because I had no intention of trying to be a hero about it. And being that we have the self-distancing stay-at-home orders, I had all the time in the world right now to handle this. So I decided to sort of space this out and do a step a day kind of thing. The other thing too to keep in mind is that originally I thought to myself I can go straight to the polishing phase, but instead I added a compounding stage. So it got a little bit longer as things went along, but also I had complications with the buffers. And anyhow, if you have all your ducks in a row and know what it is that you're going to do and don't have to worry about buffer problems and things like that, you could probably knock this out in a day. That being said, we're on day 5. This is the last day. It's at this point the easy stuff. I'm going to be applying the new finish. That's going to be the final layer on the paint. That's going to obviously provide some protection from all the sun and rain and all the rest of that sort of thing. Is going to make the paint nice and slick, even though it is nice and slick right now. I'm going to apply the new finish by hand. I think I've had enough of using those buffers. To tell you the truth, my satisfaction level with them is in the negatives here if I was to rank it from 1 to 10, so I don't even want to deal with it. And the other thing is too is that I want to be able to get in every single little detail, and obviously you could do that a little bit more efficiently by hand. So, and applying wax is no big thing. It's just, you know, wipe on, wipe off, the old Karate Kid thing. So I think I also will do a new finish layer on the windows, so that'll have a nice kind of water repellent factor to it, which is always great when it rains. You know, you don't always have to use your windshield wipers. The water just, you know, wicks right off as the wind blows across the windshield. It just wipes the water off automatically. So it's nice to have that sort of hydrophobic effect on the glass. Okay, I'm gonna get to the new finish application. I don't know if I will record this, to tell you the truth. I think everybody here who's watching this knows how to apply a layer of wax, so there's not much interest in that, but I think I'll circle back around on what the finished product looks like. So here we have the finished product out in the sun. You can see how nice the paint looks. I mean, compared to where we started, we certainly have achieved a pretty decent result, I would say. Do a little walk around here so we can see the standard of the paint at this point in time. It looks nice and glossy. So again, this was wash, clay bar, compound, polish, and then wax or new finish, which isn't the wax, but in any case, you get the idea. So you can see that it hasn't removed absolutely every single swirl and scratch, but it certainly does look better. There's no question about that. The paint has come back to life, a lot more glossy and rich, and the black looks very lustrous, whereas before it looked very dull and scarified. And I guess this is, in my opinion, the best that I could do given the circumstances of what I had to work with, but it looks pretty good if you ask me.
Finally, the project's completed, and I'm very happy with the results. It was a lot of work. It certainly took a lot of elbow grease at times, but the question is, what do I think of these products? Would I recommend them? So let's start with the Meguiar's Ultimate Compound. I do like this product. I think that it had some good attributes to it. It was easy to apply, it was easy to remove, and I never felt as though the paint was in any danger of burning or anything like that. It was a fairly user-friendly product. It's one of those things where if you're sort of new to compounding, polishing, this type of thing, this is kind of a fail-safe product where you can rest assured that you won't make any mistakes essentially unless you totally go overboard with staying in one area for way too long. But even that, I don't know that this would be strong enough to cause any burning, but I suppose misuse of anything can cause some sort of damage. But in any case, very user friendly. Would I use it again? Yeah, I would definitely try it again. And as a matter of fact, I'd like to try it again. See, the thing is that I used the worst buffers and polishers possible for this project outside of using your hand. Now, I think if you were to try to apply this by hand, what type of realistic results would you get? Well, it really depends on how much elbow grease you put into it and how long you take with your process. I would suspect that if you're going to try and do it by hand, to get really good results would take you an extremely long time. When it comes to products like this, machines just make it way, 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 way faster and way more user friendly. That being said, I would rate this product sort of a 7, 7.5 out of 10 with an asterisk. And the asterisk is the fact that I used a lousy polisher in order to apply this to the paint. Now, if I had my Torque X, more specifically, I think I could have gotten a much better result because I would have had a more appropriate cutting pad that I could have used instead of this yellow pad that you see that I used to apply it in the background here. It's not really a cutting pad. I don't even know what kind of pad. It's basically a sponge. That's all it is. It doesn't have much quality to it, let's put it that way. But that being said, even while using a very poor quality buffer, polisher, and polishing pad, I was pretty happy with the results. I mean, it wasn't perfect. It didn't get out every swirl mark. It didn't get out every scratch, but I suspect that I could have done a better job had I had the right equipment. Would I recommend the Ultimate Compound? Yes, I definitely recommend it. I think it's worth a try, and I think in the future I might even try it again on a different vehicle for a paint restoration with the Torque polisher, and we'll see what kind of results we get out of that. Now, the Ultimate Polish, the Meguiar's Ultimate Polish. Would I recommend this? Quite frankly, no. I don't think I would, and there's a good reason for that. Though I did like the results, the car did get a very nice glossy, deep black, lustrous finish. It did a good job in that respect. The one problem I would say with the polish, which supersedes everything else positive that it did do, is the fact that it was extremely difficult to remove. A complete nightmare. And I tried so many different variations of things to try and remove the polish, whether it be making it a smaller area that I do at a time, whether it be the timing of how long I left it on the surface, whether it be cleaning the bonnets that I was using, replacing them with new ones. It didn't seem to matter what it is that I did. It was, I think, the polish itself was just a very difficult product to remove, and I ended up spending, I think, more time removing the product than I did as far as applying it and going over it with the buffer, which to me is unacceptable for an automotive product. You want to be able to have something that goes on easily, that does what it claims to do, and is easily removed. This product, I guess you could say, accomplished 2 out of the 3 with good results, mind you. Yes, it does give a nice lustrous finish. However, the reality is that the fact that it's so difficult to remove just makes it a no-buy for me. Never again. I don't ever want to go through the experience of having to polish that and buff that polish off the paint as I did this time. How would I rate it out of 10? For that reason and that reason alone, I would give it about a 5 on 10 because the results were nice, yes, but far too difficult to use. Now, New Finish. What do I think about New Finish? Well, as I had mentioned before, New Finish is a great product. I use it all the time. I've been using it for years and years and years. It is a fantastically easy product to put on, fantastically easy to remove, and it protects extremely well. I've never had a problem with this product. It does what it claims to do. It does protect for a very long time. Now, I don't know if necessarily it's a once a year type polish. I think it's best to try and apply these things more than once a year. But even if you do apply it only once a year, this is the one that I think you want to try and use. I've used other waxes before, whether they be Mother's Wax or Zymol, this type of stuff, very expensive ones. And they were good too, but ever since I tried New Finish, I just found it just extremely easy to use, extremely easy to apply and remove, and it just did a great job. Not only that, but I use it on different surfaces. I New Finished the glass as well on this car, and that just does a great job of wicking the water away, similar to how Rain-X would. As well, of course, it'll maintain the life of your wiper blades, and you'll probably get a longer lifespan out of them as a result of that. So do I recommend New Finish? Yes. How would I rate New Finish? I'd give it a good 9, 9.5 out of 10. And I've used it for years and I have absolutely no complaints about it. The clay bar system that I used the Autoglym, just to refresh your memory. And this clay bar from Autoglym was excellent. I really, really liked it. I thought that the lubricant that came with it too was very nice. It smelled great. And it had the added benefit of restoring the plastics. When I got a little bit of overspray onto the plastic and wipe it off, it seemed to do a nice job of bringing a little bit of shine and luster back to the plastics. But that's not exactly what the product is meant for, of course, and it's just sort of an aside. However, the clay bar itself, excellent. It did a great job. It took off, I would say, just about all the contaminants. It left the paint feeling extremely smooth, and I would most certainly use this again. Would I recommend it? Absolutely. How do I grade it? I'd give it a good 9, 9.5 out of 10. So Autoglym. It wasn't the cheapest one by far. It actually was the most expensive clay bar system, but I used it with great success, and I would recommend, if you're wondering whether or not to try it, don't think about it anymore. Just pick it up. It'll be great. All right, well, thanks for watching. If you made it this far, I really appreciate it. Perhaps you can consider clicking the subscribe button. Make a comment down below if you have a comment, or if you saw something that I did that you thought that I could improve on. I'm always hoping to learn as well as maybe spread some of the knowledge that I have. So I'm open to all sorts of different comments that you may have, and I appreciate you making it this far and watching. Have a good one, and I'll see you in the next one.